Let's have a very quick look now uh, at some practices. I have taken a few prominent examples like the temple, the stoop. I've stuck to one narrative because if I try to deal with the whole of art, we'll have to have, a course all through MDes and PhD. Huh? So we just take a few examples I've chosen which illustrate this narrative of mine. I've taken one idea here. Please remember, I've taken the idea of the dialectical journey from myself, self as a narrow self, in a individual group form, to self as the other. So I bring in the other as part of myself, right? The sansar or whoever. So I become a pratirup. Then with that, I see how the other and the self are connected. We are one. I see that oneness. So that brings me to the third stage of unity, right? And then from there, I see, oh my God, we're all like a large universal self. I transcend my narrow egotistical existence to a world that the cosmic order. So the cosmic order is there, but I am now part of that because I've shed away my other layers, right? While I'm in this world, I don't have to die. It's not like I have to die to reach that order. So unlike the Christian mythology, you don't have to die to get heaven or hell, as for that matter. The Indians are quite smart. You carry your hell and heaven right here in this birth, whether
Great.
you believe in rebirth or not. But
Yeah.
right here, by your actions, there are some very interesting Western scholars, who understood this. T.S. Eliot and Yeats understood the still point of the turning world. We can discuss this later. And some of the great art critic Herbert Reed, he actually didn't understand immanence and transcendence, and he said that he looked at temple as a failed example of art.
Mm.
Yeah, failed example. Please read the book Symbols of Art of Modern Art, Concepts of Modern Art, which used to be my Bible as a young girl. And he didn't understand how a small garbhagriha can have such a massive shikhar on top. He said this is a failed form of art. And then in a book by Foster, a British writer, he has an interesting experience of a British woman going to a temple where she faints because she doesn't understand the chaos in a temple. There is a monkey, there is a serpent, there is a faun, there is a deity, there are children, there's so much chaos, and everybody is lost in some rust. So she doesn't, and she faints. Mrs. Moore faints. Later on, when she dies, then she understands, when she's dying, she understands that was the transcendental unity of all forms, Sarv Roop Ka Ek Roop. It's very interesting how Western imagination seeks to understand the concepts I'm teaching you here. And often the scholars don't understand. Herbert Reed doesn't understand the temple form.
In fact, we wrote a lot of things about design and very, very, physical aspects.
And this fellow, and E.M. Foster in Passage to India, admits that the Western mind cannot comprehend transcendence and immanence together, and how Indians in the daily chaos create a whole writ and say, I am there. T.S. Eliot, William Butler Yeats, some of these poets, they did. Okay, I'll just look at a few forms. I'll rush through this. These are something now you'll be more familiar and I can move faster because we've touched the basic philosophical concepts and some of these you'll all be very familiar with. I am going to look at temple and stoop and how they express these concepts of immanence and transcendence, roop in aroop and then pararoop. Okay, nothingness, void, formlessness, void, and ka. The Sanskrit word for void is ka. Ka is nothingness, whole, emptiness. But kha becomes both sukha, whole well made, dukha, badly made whole. It becomes khagesh, the sky, or nothing. So the word kha is very expressive in if you were looking at language as symbol of nothingness and all, very much like the shunya. The symbols are shunya, zero, shunya. It can be both. It can be nothing and it can be all, like the mathematic symbol of zero, depending on how you place it and how you see it. So all those so temple and soup are very interesting because they try to give a tangible vocabulary to intangible concepts, right? I mean, these are all intangible concepts we've been discussing so far. And then after giving them an intangible form, then they make a whole iconography and vocabulary for those forms. So actually, a whole design vocabulary comes out of this effort through generations to create a tangible form, a figurative And then there is a very nice interplay of how the language itself becomes very metaphorical and symbolic. That's why I give you the example of ka, because what is ka? Is it a word or is it a form? So this is so it's very interesting. And we will see how, for example, I was very interested. I read in Kapla Vasty's article how the whole idea of the temple, so you have the cave or the guha. From there you move, guha is also your home dwelling, shelter, the gaha, and from there you move to the garbhagriha. So this whole journey from sansara to nirvana is so beautifully expressed in just the interplay of three terms: guha, gaha, griha, right? So how the vocabulary emerged and how the vocabulary expressed these ideas is quite interesting. A difference, like a layering of meaning. And now we have a look at the few forms very quickly. My God. So here, as you can all see, all of you are familiar with there is a whole, yeah, you can again be a whole lot of research on the temple form, but I'm only stuck to the basic to only express this idea. The idea that Herbert Reed did not understand on how a small garbhagriha can support a massive shikha. He contrasted that with the cathedral, where you have a mass, where the main thing is where the image of the altar is, right? And there is the at the apse. Huh? So that is the main point where the sacred image is. Just the reverse. Here you have, but this, our temple is creating a journey from sansar to nirvana, from outside to inside, from bondage to liberation. So even if you don't believe in the deity, the thought behind that is very interesting. It's a metaphysical journey that you are making by doing neti, immersing yourself in the world and then setting it aside. I have seen this, now I set it aside. I have seen it, now I set it aside. So you're in a way exfoliating, delayering yourself, your own psyche, decluttering in sustainable development goals. I'll call it, you're decluttering yourself, you're non-thingifying yourself, right? You're moving away from being Chakku's product to being your own product through a process. That is what the temple actually signifies. And that is why all the elements are like that there. So you have when you enter, you have the small tank where you're supposed to cleanse your feet or your hand. Then you have the Pradikshina Path or the circumambulatory path. Then you have, and they have followed very beautiful images, especially if you remember Khajuraho. All the Western scholars condemn, and even Wendy Doniger's latest book, and all of them cannot understand how the erotic and the mysticals are, coexist. It is impossible for the Western mind to understand this. We do this very simple. We say that the erotica or the sensual world is a part of your world. It's part of your sansar. It's who you are. That's the truth. But that's not all that you are. But unless you engage with that, that's the interesting point. We don't begin by saying, hey, you guys, be celibate. Don't you dare look at the freezers there. Avoid that. We don't need to have a sex education subsequently, but or taboo the sex. I'm giving you one example. We begin by saying, oh, that is part of your world. It's who you are. But that's not all that you are. So you move from those freezers, which are full of, calm, earth. And from there, calm and earth, from there you move on. All kind of scenes are there, and then from there you move on slowly to the images recede and the sculptures become less till you enter then you move through the doorway where you have to bend and go. It's a lowering of your head, the rejection of your ego, right? You enter through a massive doorway, you enjoy the frescoes, that's who you are, that's your sansar. Then you start delayering and you enter through the doorway, and then you enter the garbhagriha, which is usually nothing there. The garbhagriha can be the most disappointing art form or art space in a temple because that's actually shunya, it's a void. Now you're moved from arup. Outside the temple was originally meant to be the world of chaos. Now you don't show it, but you move from the chaos to the form, pratirup, all forms, to the form within, which is again form. So you move from one void to another void. But the journey from that original void to the liberating void is through the sansar. So interestingly enough, ancient Indian thought is not really abnegative. It believes in, and even Maya is an epistemological form. Without that phenomena, you will not discover yourself. So you have to engage to detach, and the temple expresses it perfectly. Of course, I gave the example of Kailash because that's a very interesting example of how form is not what you make, it's what you uncover. There's another very interesting Indian concept of art or design, that form is given. You have to declutter the world around and the form manifests itself. Very interesting. Ellora is a very interesting example. You can all go and see Ellora. Okay. Next quick form is a stoop. And this is, of course, of the Sanchi stoop. I want to just mention that the origin of the stoop is also a very interesting idea of design as art in ancient Indian thought. In the Rig Veda mentions the Hiranya stoop, which is actually a pile of splendor from which the cosmos is produced. It's like a cosmic fire. And this is also associated with the perfection of a person or soul or enlightenment. Now, this is the Rig Veda, right? We don't have any images of the Rig Veda. We only have uh, the riches. But how does this golden cosmic fire, how does it actually become individuated? I said no, from otherwise it will be aroop. It will just be formless. So you give it a form by setting up the pillar. So in the yagya when they did, they would set up the yoop. Yoop was a name for pillar. All right. So by setting up the yoop, you and at the sacrificial place of Yajna, you're now invoking this idea of the perfect cosmos or the Rith. And that perfect cosmos, the Rith, you're now giving it a symbol and anchoring it there and connecting your sansar or your world with the cosmos. So the pillar does that. The column does that. Now, this has all been associated with the Buddhist art forms, and you can see that in the Sanchi. Originally, the Sanchi stoop actually had a yoop in front. The Ashokan pillar was set up there. It's now fallen on the ground, and you can't see it there. And this yoop or the pillar now symbolizes 4 portions. This is taken from V.S. Agrawal. If you wish, you can read his book. It's an excellent book uh, on Indian art. So there is a portion at the column which is dug in the ground, which is sacred to the world of ancestors. So I'm discussing with you the symbolic language of design in ancient Indian art, giving you an example of the stoop and the yoop, right? And what did it mean? The portion in the ground was not just for holding the pillar, but showed your obligations to your own ancestors. Then there's a portion which is up to the girdle rope, which is this world of men. Then there is a portion which above the ring, which is the world of divinity or deity and God. Above that is the world where you even transcend the understanding of multiple gods. You're one with the cosmos. So the pillar was a very important symbol of connecting this with that, right? So then this is a way you find this in every book on art, even on the net. I will not spend too much time on this because you'll find this very easily there. Just wanted to say that this has the same structure as a temple of Sakyam Pradakshina, which leads you into the void. The soup is just an empty dome. It's just a dome which also shows the anda or the sky. So it's the heaven and the earth, and then all the elements of the soup will have a meaning to them. So you have the hemispherical dome, which symbolizes the dome enclosing the earth. Then it has a square rail unit or the harmika, which shows the world of the mountain. And then a yashti, symbolizing, as I said, the cosmic axis. So you're again reproducing the elements of the sphere, spheres being linked through a column. Then you have various symbols of the Buddha, and then you have the entire. So please remember, I said that every form, every root has its own internal structure, and that structural elements often have a symbolic meaning in ancient Indian art, and usually possibly even now. Then you have 4 gateways. Most of the gateways actually are linked with Buddha's own life and his stories. So the point I wanted to make here was that the soup becomes a whole image of the fullness in the void, which is like the garbhagriha in the temple. And it has this perambulation path signifying the journey of the self from the outer to into the inner world, and from empirical to a transcendental reality. So although one is traditionally a Hindu sacred form and the other is a Buddhist, but you can see that the ideas are common, and they're really about moving uh, from uh, from engagement to a detached engagement, subjective. Now, okay, so here I have discussed the symbols in great detail here. The dharma, the bodhi, these are symbols associated with the Buddha himself.
Yeah.
And each one of them has a significance. And that is why when you see any Buddhist stoop, and if you see these images, they are not just the physical form that you're enjoying, they also have this deeper meaning. The footprint of the Buddha, the lotus, all of the stupa itself. And then here again, like in a temple, in the stupa again, you have these very beautiful carvings and a lot of embellishments, and all of them, they coexist, showing the, like I say, Buddha's footprints with a lot of carvings in the brackets. Again, the stupa becomes like the temple, a composite design of manifest cosmos with wisdom and liberation, and also the phenomenal diversity of the world. So the whole stoop is actually a symbol of the phenomenal diversity of the universe, its empirical forms through which plenitude, through which we move to the.
Yeah. Just look at this bottom image, no, because this right side bottom, the elephant actually is garlanding, and there are only the feet in the bottom.
Only the feet, yes, because these are iconic.
In fact, it is like fabulous, depiction, and students are able to see the elephant with a large garland.
This is what I wanted to make the point. See, on the Toran up there on top, you have these beautiful forms of foliage and geese.
Birds and the leaves and
yes, and they're so beautifully stylistically designed. In the same little frieze or in the same little Toran, in the same image, you have a symbolic, like the footprint and the wheel in the footprint, right? The dharma, footprints are of the Lord Buddha, his presence on this earth. Dharma is his enlightenment, and the elephants are celebrating the enlightenment, but they're all very stylized and yet in a way naturalistic. They're representative and yet they are symbolic. Please remember this coexistence of two functions of design here, representational and symbolization. They're the same design. If the design is the same, but when you understand its significance, you start seeing the layering of meaning in the same form then. It is very beautiful just by itself. You can study it like a geometric pattern and spatial composition. You can study that. You can do a biodiversity study of what are the forms of animal and birds there. So the Indian artist, for all his obsession with spiritualism, was a very keen artist who had a sense of just physical form and its proportion and how he was dealing with his proportions. Okay, so we'll just go quickly to, now we've dealt with the temple, we've dealt with the stoop to see how ideas of immanence, transcendence are expressed simultaneously in one root, in one form, and how the phenomenal diversity of forms coexists with the idea of no form, void. The shunya is a void. Now I'm going to look at a very different thing. I'm now going to go from architecture to the sculptural form of the yogi. I chose the yogi. I had a choice of choosing very many, but I'm fascinated by the yogi in Indian thought, ancient Indian thought, not the political yogi, please. So don't get me wrong. All right. But it just shows that even that the yogi is so powerful that the yogi continues to attract popular Indian imagination till today. It cannot have been so broad. Anyway, so the Indian sculptures depict the dynamism of being and becoming through the yogi. Right, I'm going to discuss the form of the yogi in Harappa, then yogi as Buddha, and then finally the dancer. So I'll discuss two quick forms with you, yogi and the dancer, and show how the two forms come together to express this dynamic design of becoming and being. We call it flux and stillness. There are many forms you can use, motion and stasis, energy and poise, and how all art is an interplay of these ideas. Right, and how so yogi is not simply a human being, he's actually a realized spirit, transcendental, who takes the human form. And so the yogi has very special meaning in Indian imagination. It evolves from the Mohenjo-daro, from this Pashupati seal you see. And this is an interpretation that John Marshall gives to the seals, calling this a yogic posture or the Mool Bandhasana. And they also identify this with the Vedic deity of the Rudra or the Pashupati, or proto of the Shiva form. Essentially, it's a form in meditation with a yogic asana, feet joined in and the heels turned up and a sunken belly. So this is the earliest form of the yogi we have. I think we have some in Bhimbetka, but I need to go back to my notes on that. But here you see a proto-historical form of an image which is still today an idea very powerful, just to tell you how continuous Indian tradition is. Then you have the Buddha. we have already discussed. So this was in the Harappan time. We had the what you think is a prototype of Shiv. Then we have a long silence, and then the when originally Buddha didn't have any images to represent him. I think you all know that. And these are known as anachronic symbols without any images. We discussed the feet, we discussed the wheel, because Buddha himself didn't believe in permanence of the empirical self. So how could you believe to make a form for one who didn't believe in the permanence of form, right? So there is still, so that's why we have the stoop and all these designs. However, the Buddha very soon acquired the form of the yogi. So we call it the yogi. It's a combination of the prince and the yogi. You know, in the Harappan art, we also have the priest king, which I didn't show you here. So the idea, again, don't get me wrong politically, but the idea of authority being converging in the form of the priest and the yogi is a very ancient idea in ancient Indian tradition. And the Buddha, although he didn't believe in not even valuing his own form, soon became to the aesthetic imagination of the Indian artists. Uh, the whole idea of the yogi, and there's a whole Buddhist philosophy on how you move from the Dharmkaya, which is the Buddha original as idea, to the Sambhogkaya or the body of grace, and then the Nirmanakaya or the body on the earth. So they said this could have been the body of the earth. And in the postmodern period, specifically the Kushan period, the Buddha image emerges. And it has a very, so, you know, so now you move to the iconic, and here the Buddha image combines this whole idea of abnegation or, you know, release and nivritti, as well as with actual engagement through the idea of compassion. The Buddha chose to be a teacher, to give up his own moksha, nirvana, because he wanted to teach, but as a liberated soul. So now there was a challenge of expression in the plastic form, because how can you render a human form so transparent as to express a superhuman reality, right? You can do that through symbol, but how do you express a human form like that? So again, symbology comes to our to aid here, and they devised 32 Mahapurush Lakshan, which they imposed upon the Buddha form. I've shown a few: Ushnish or the knot on the top, Unna or the a protuberant forehead, then this eye in the center, and then the lump. So there are 32 such lakshans. This is one of the iconography to show that the form of Buddha here is a not the original Buddha, but the, like in Plato, not the original Buddha, but the Nirmanakaya, the Buddha on this earth. So two great images we have of the Mathura and the Gandhar school. These are the Mathura school images of Buddha in Sthanastha Mudra, and these are influenced, they say, by local art forms and then these are the Gandhar images, right? The Gandhar images, this is a sthanic or the standing form. This is the Gandhar head, the bust of the Buddha. They're very strongly influenced by the Greco-Roman style. Now, the point I'm making here is you can look at this on my left-hand side is on my left is the Gandhar, and on my right is the Mathura school of. Interestingly enough, here I wanted to make a point. While there is an iconographic depiction of the Buddha through symbols, which are iconographic, right? I mean, they are frozen, they're conventional. But if you want to study how design is influenced by prevailing situations and influences, this is a very good example of both are Buddha, but both have a different form. That's slightly different. In the Mathura, it appears to be more earthy, you know, it is directly looking you into the eye, right? But the Gandhar is meant to be more meditative and inward looking. So this is how the Buddhist art scholars have read the two forms to show how the image evolves finally to the Sarnath image of the Buddha. This they say is a perfected Buddha image, because here he actually seems to be the perfection of the meditative gaze and the expression of compassion. So this is one example of how the Buddha image is actually a very well studied example of how, in trying to deal with a very abstract idea and a supra-essential reality, Indian artists designed the Buddha image and used the material form to work towards a meditative equilibrium of compassion. So this is a very good, if you study Buddhist art, you have a great experience and understanding of how Indian artists work with materials to create something which is completely non-material. and expressive. Remember, art as expressive design. The other form that I want to very quickly touch upon is the dancer. Again, why? Because in the Harappan civilization, we have the two dancing forms, the bronze girl and the male torso, which again Marshall says is actually a dancer. In fact, Marshall relates this dancer, which is a broken torso, with, I've quoted Marshall here, with the youthful Shiva Nataraj. Right? This is from there. So I'm just showing to you the continuity from Harappa till, till now. The dance is a very expressive symbolic form in Indian tradition altogether. And although there's a big gap in between from Harappa till we come to the, to the Mauryan time, we don't have material forms. You only have texts. But look at the continuity of the roop or the form, because it is expressing a an idea which is transcendental, because the philosophy stays, so the forms re-emerge even if they are reenacted. The idea continues. The idea behind the form continues. The form is partly stable and permanent, partly it changes. I want to here quickly touch upon the Nataraj image. See, Buddha is the expression of Nataraj as a dancer. That's why I've brought in the Nataraj here. And because Marshall connects the Harappan torso with the Nataraj form, and so in Harappa, we have two traditions. We have the yogic form, the seal, remember, which by Marshall is also related to the Pashupatinath or the Shiv. So the Shiv now has two forms, one which is that of the yogi, the one who releases, and one who's an ascetic, and one who's a dancer. Right? Have you noticed in my examples how I gave you two examples, the Pashupati? Marshall connects both the forms, the yogi form and the dancing form with Shiv. This we don't know. We can't read the script. It is Marshall's interpretation, right? What is interesting is the line of thinking, because if you understand the line of thinking, then we then interpret the form. That is how you interpret design as form, by understanding its layered significance and then seeing the connections to the traditions of, of that particular knowledge sphere, right? So Buddha was perfection. Nataraj is all full energy. It's a dancing form. But Nataraj again is like energy and stillness within. That's what I want to discuss here. So both in the way I like Nataraj is because Nataraj is not Buddha. But if Buddha signified yogi, the ascetic, Nataraj is both the ascetic and the dancer. So finally, you actually have the two traditions, the Pravritti Nivritti, the Shramanic, the Vedic, the immersion, the abnegation, the Sansar, Nirvana, all coming together in one image. Look at the power of this form. In one image, you have all the functions, Srishti, then the maintenance, then Sanghar, then concealed knowledge, mystical knowledge, Nigraha, and the grace that in that cosmic dance, we may all participate. That is Anugraha. So here is the self becoming one with the Supreme Self, which may just be within yourself. When I talk these terms, I'm not asking you to worship Shiv. I'm using the image as an image of how our consciousness evolves. So there is a whole iconography of Nataraj, which I will not go into in detail because you can actually read up on the Wikipedia in great detail, and which shows how different elements are used for different meanings. But all of them move between. So the Damru itself is of time as well as rhythm. Then fire is both creation and destruction. The snake is both, exfoliation of rebirth as well as something evil. There are various mudras on the hand which tell you, abhay, grace. Then there are three eyes which show you three different functions. Also the three gun. Then the dwarf on whom the Nataraja is overcoming evil. The unkempt hair is a symbol of a yogi who has left this world. But in the hair are locked the moon, skull, and all, and the dancer transcends them all. And the smiling face of Shiva is calm. In that entire energy, there is calmness. This is why the Indian government gifted Shiva. The image I showed you is of the one at CERN actually, and it is there because they said that, and this is what they said. You must read. Hundreds of years ago, Indian artists created visual images of dancing Shivas in a beautiful series. Physicists have used the most advanced technology to portray cosmic dance that unifies ancient mythology, religious art, and modern physics, because nowadays there's a big thing on quantum physics and the Indian notion of radical discontinuous time. There's a whole philosophy which I can go into later, which seem to come together. Very quickly, now we look at the very few images I have here of the idea of nature and man for all those interested in the idea of sustainability or harmony in the ancient Indian tradition. The key principle of art is this deep bond. So nature is both symbolic, expressing something beyond, but also coexisting with human order, right? There's no hierarchy there. Very interesting forms are the yaksh and the shalbhanjikas. This is the shalbhanjika, the woman lyrical against the tree. So these are all the coexistence of nature and natural world and human world, right? Of harmony. There are some very significant art motifs which you can study in V.S. Agrawal's book, which is a vocabulary of Indian art, like Poon Kum and so on and so forth. Poon Kum is very important. These are not light motifs. They have symbolic significance till today. Till today, we place water in a bowl for for many purposes, both prayer as well as water itself is very symbolic. But so this has a very strong symbolic significance of coming together of dual aspects of life, of holding the vase holds, but what does it hold? That which is formless, water. So it's very interesting how Sat and Asat, or fullness and emptiness, again come together and linked with foliage. So again, an image of also in a in an anthropological form that take the form of Ganga and Yamuna. So again, you see the coming together of the human world with the world of nature very seamlessly. Then you have, of course, sculpture is just even in tribal art, you have the tree of life, and it's a very important image. The pillar I've already discussed as being very powerful. These are in how it's various, you can study, again, you can study the pillar on the Wikipedia and how different, each image here signifies as a very well modeled image as well as a symbolic significance. Quickly close with the Hast mudras because you can study that in detail. The Hast mudras are again forms of symbols that are used. Again, the design is just a hand, right? So, but it has the same hand comes in dance forms as well as in sculpture. So you need to maybe do more studies of that. And to close, we have a little bit of painting to give you an idea about the 6 features of painting or the Shadang, which are Roop, Bhed, Praman, Bhav, Lavanya, Yojana, Sadrishya, and Vandika. We have 6 elements which suggest what a Roop should be like or what should be its various elements, which also show the Indians' concern for proposal. It's not that it's symbolic and I can do anything. There's a canon behind that. The Ajanta murals are very good examples. We don't have much examples of ancient Indian art, but if you go through the Ajanta murals, Padmapani, then geometrical forms of nature, these are an auspicious symbol. The elephant, this is again a symbolic thing, and you can go on. There are a lot of them, and you get an idea about how the various canons of art are represented. And you can study the Ajanta in a greater detail. I think who has it? Samantha has a whole lecture on Ajanta. Maybe you can look at that. Remember, I presented you only one idea in the ancient Indian work. Well, one idea, which is also very complex, and from just one perspective through some forms. Just to give you a flavor of how complex this whole tradition is and how contemporary it still is and how it has so much of permanence, stability along with change, continuity and change. And you need to study all of them from a technical point of view, where you see the engineering of these art forms, right? So you see design as engineering in art then. And you've only seen design as expressive form here. You see design as very skillful engineering in all those forms that I've shown you. Finally, Chakku, I know how hard all this is to young minds. So we are actually as a group busy using 3D and 2D art forms to create an understanding of the temple. For example, we've chosen Kedarnath and we try to teach it's through immersive art and 3D, all the elements within a temple. So next time, hopefully I'm better prepared. I can show this to you actually like an immersive experience. And so you can move through it all. And then we also try to create a game on it. We thought that how will I know whether I know the temple architecture or not? We make children play a game where if they get the elements wrong, then they cannot actually have that temple in place. We also try to place a sort of an art form in its natural environment. Because please remember, today they are separate art forms, but once upon a time they had a context around them. Then we are doing a similar thing with Bhimbetka, where this is where we are trying to look at the various art forms in Bhimbetka, the bow, rock, and all its forms. And the whole idea here is to make the tradition of Indian art a living reality and an immersive experience. So some of you who may not be interested in Indian art per se, but are interested in animation and 3D or 2D, can actually, work with traditional Indian art forms to make them living experiences for a larger audience. And just engaging in that, you will realize how much of flexibility there is in that, and how the Indian artists or the Indian. Finally, if you notice, I mentioned no names of artists because, as I said, they are anonymous. We do not know. We cannot say the Indian so and so made this. We only know which age they came in and the ages they went through, because the very idea of art was not as decorative. The design was not manipulative. The design was not commodification. The design was expressive and was part of a tradition, both a metaphysical tradition as well as a tradition of imaginative forms.